Today's video, I want to talk about some common rider posture errors, and we'll start by going up through positions in our seat. So this is James's saddle that we use for working equitation, and I wanted to use it today so I can also demonstrate some common things that we see with stirrups and where they come from. So I think most of us are familiar with what an ideal seat would look like. So you'd have a line from your hip to your ankle up through your shoulder. So first one is that, let's look at when my pelvis is too far forward. So the first thing that happens when my pelvis is too far forward is we see that James's head goes down to the ground. Now that's not a bad thing for him to be doing, except that when I try to pick him up from this position, I have to do it with my lower back. So the muscles on my back will begin to pull and my head wants to fall forward, my shoulders rotating, and everyone's seats are a little bit different in terms of what happens next. But quite commonly, if you're a little bit ahead of the motion, by having too closed an angle in your hip, a little bit more on your pubic bone, again, your shoulders tend to want to come forward, which is then can be even exaggerated to here, try to fix it. But then again, that's channeling that energy through my lower back. Another common would be to sit more toward the tailbone, and we can see how that picks his head up. He is slowing down. Even when I soften my shoulders to try to create a little bit more movement through my body, he's still really struggling with carrying me. So there I went back to a neutral pelvic angle. And these are fun things to experiment with your horses. And I like to do them while they're working on pillar one. Not saying go and play with extremes in your seat in pillar one with your horse, but if you want to see how your seat affects your horse, it's a good idea to show them pillar one while you're experimenting. So those are the two common issues that we see in our pelvis in terms of the angle front to back and our relationship to our seat bones. So now we'll look at some lower leg issues. So sometimes you'll get riders that are a little tight through the back of their leg, and oftentimes that is coming from either tension in the hamstring or the calf, just those muscles are short, or the rider is tight through the quad here, wanting to bring their seat up, and so they're attempting to bring their lower leg back to help to create that balance. So when that happens, you want to create a little bit of length down the back of your leg. So I'll do a quick stretch and then release, stretch, release, stretch, release. And that falls into pillar one for riding because it has to do with our ability to receive the horse's energy up and down our body, where we're using the stirrup just as a pivot point and not as a brace around which to rotate. So it's a soft pivot point, just like if I wanted to stretch it, I could hang my ankles, my heels off of a step and work on that stretch down. Now, heels up can also be tension in the ankle or tension in the foot. So that is something that you'll want to play with both on and off the saddle. And that's about helping your foot and your ankle and your lower leg to be in a receptive energy, more like the landing phase when we walk and less like the pushing phase where we're now taking the leg up into the next step. Another stretch to help with that is to If it is tension in the calf, then you'll want to think about engaging the muscles on the shin to help bring the lower leg forward. Again, where I am right now, it would create a chair seat here where I'm pushing myself back into the saddle. And again, we see that James's response to that, even though I'm still moving my feet and encouraging him with my legs, his response to that is to slow down. So I'll come back to my neutral position. Next area that we're going to talk about is, well, same area, other issue is riders that have their ankles too far down and are pressing and creating that, using it as an active rotation and then trying to hold it. The number one place that this becomes an issue is that it does start to interrupt your connection with the saddle. So I'm losing that heaviness, losing that one-to-one connection with his movement. And up to the extremes, I can either be pushing myself out of the saddle or I can be pushing myself into the back of the saddle here. And now instead of targeting my whole body to receive and redirect James, I am targeting predominantly my legs. So now let's talk about lower back, which is different than your pelvis, although they do tend to follow one another. They don't always. So some riders will have a nice neutral or be able to find a nice neutral pelvic angle, but then we'll have a little bit more of a lordotic curve through their lower back here. And that creates a very similar shape to what we saw in the beginning. And we can see that this is definitely not where James would like me to be. It puts a lot of pressure just behind his withers. And it puts a lot of pressure in my lower back. The other one would be, this one I'm not very good at creating the shape of, but would be where you have not quite enough roundness, arch through the lower back, even though you're able to maintain the flat of the seat bones and look up. And this one tends to create a lack of flexibility. So if you look at this one as being too flexible through the lower back, this one is not quite flexible enough, which is also why some of these positions have developed into cues in various disciplines to assist with the horses understanding what we want, is we are either creating more or blocking energy. And now we'll look at the upper back. So in the upper back, we can see really round shoulders. And again, we see that that encourages James to go all the way to the ground. And part of where that comes from is the same place that it creates on the ground of this receptive shape, like a hug. We are inviting the horse all the way up through our seat. And that is why you will see many, many videos of older riders that are working on following the horse and encouraging the horse's more collected movements, that they will begin to arch their back to offer the horse a place to go. Then we have our neutral position through the rib cage, and then finally a very upright position through the rib cage. And in this upright position, even on the flat of my seat bones, I am pushing James away from me as his energy hits my mid back and then is not able to continue all the way up through my body. So this is a common one for us when we go to show and we think, oh, I need to get my shoulders back, and we pick up our entire rib cage. So we'll come back to the neutral position here. And we see James work on opening that top line. So again, creating a really round upper body can help guide our horse into creating a more receptive top line. Gotta snag the grass. creating a more receptive top line. Neutral, and then upright tends to be very blocking for both horse and rider. And in this position too, my lower back is having to make up for the deficit in the movement up through my body. Change across the diagonal again. So the next place that we want to look at are our shoulders. So many of you got the assessment that your shoulders, your chest was closed, and that was rolling your shoulders in. So very similar to having a rounded upper body. The goal there, why our body picks that, is that it helps to channel the horse's energy into our upper back. The problem comes from that if he then pulls on me, I'm not grounded through my scapula, and it also puts tension on my neck. So finding that happy medium between that my rib cage, my sternum, my thoracic spine is in a receptive energy, and my horse can pick me up and move me and manipulate that with their energy, but also being grounded back through my scapula so that if I need to take some energy and channel it, say, into pillar 2, that I can maintain that integrity up and down my body and then take it forward without losing my balance and losing pillar 1. Now, it is also possible to bring the shoulders too far back, which also tends to bring the elbow too far back. And then it is difficult to control the length of reins. The shoulder has become too immobilized, and you will often see that with a very upright chest and sternum carriage, creating too much stability through the upper body and too much rotation through the joint. So now let's talk about forelimbs. So I think talked a little bit about my dinosaur arm thing that happens, where I will shorten my arm as I go to make contact and things like that. Now that comes from the force couple relationship between my biceps on the front and my tricep on the back of my arm. Many riders who have a tendency to do this will then overcorrect for that reason and straighten the elbow. But again, we have now created too much stability. And so if James were to pull on me at this point, I would most likely be pulled forward. So one of the best ways to correct that dinosaur arm bicep issue is to go into a tricep raise, which is to bend your arm and then straighten it. And when I am straightening my arm, I am engaging the tricep on the back. You can do these on your horses and off your horses. And a lot of it just has to do with, what are we doing on a day-to-day basis? So I'm picking up and carrying Logan. And so my biceps are often working more than my triceps are. When he was smaller, I used to, a couple times a day, use him to do my tricep exercises. But now that he's 30 pounds, he's a little heavy for that. Another big one for our bodies is where our head is looking. So especially trainers, those of us that ride alone, we have a tendency to start to look at the back of the horse's head. And so being able to pick our eyes up and target, balance our head over our neck and our shoulders, helps to make it so that, like, as my head goes down here, notice that my the next thing that wants to collapse is my rib cage, and then I want to roll back onto my pockets a little bit more. And then my shoulders came in. So that's a really common progression, especially as the core becomes tired. So checking that if you find yourself rolling forward, that one, your core may be weakening, but that you want to be able to hold yourself up with the scapula. And just like with the horses, any error that we're seeing with our seat is it's an engineering puzzle. Okay, you're looking at it and you're going, okay, I know that I should be doing this. Having it in the gray matter is only a small portion of the conversation. And so then we have to start to take our fact finding mission here and go, okay, well, what is happening that is creating that shape through my body? And maybe it is as simple as, like there I put my leg on and I relaxed, um, I engaged my calf more than I wanted to. And so my heels came up. And so now I can focus on that now that I'm aware of it. But also things like the days that I'm quad dominant and my quad is wanting to come up into the saddle with me, like there, and it's restricting my range of motion. It's wanting to pull my lower back forward. All of these little things, looking at that where I pull my leg back, I'm going, hey, hamstring, I need you to balance out that tension. Now, ideally, my core and my psoas and everything else would be strengthened enough that my quad does not feel the need to come online. And that will happen in time, but that is not where I am today. So much of this is looking at a realistic expectation of what can I address in the session today so that tomorrow will be that little bit better. I hope these help, and I look forward to discussing rider position in the live tomorrow. Bye.